Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Beshilas. I am a researcher at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Thank you for the introduction. I am really excited to be here. I will be talking about financing tribal energy projects. I'll have a slight focus on community solar because of the New Mexico's Community Solar Act that y'all talked about yesterday. Let's get started. Thanks so much. Okay. So just quickly as my agenda for the day, I will be talking about project finance and tribal roles in solar development. Then we'll have an opportunity for some questions. You can do it in chat or via voice. And then I'll talk about tax equity partnerships with another opportunity for some questions. Now, what is project finance? Project finance for solar is the financing of a solar project using a non-recourse financial structure. Non-recourse means that the debt used to finance the project is secured by collateral. In this context, the solar project itself is the collateral. If the borrower defaults on the loan, the lender can take the collateral but cannot go after the borrower's other assets. So if you default on your loan, they can take the solar project, but they can't take a building or go into your bank accounts, etc. In project finance, the debt and or equity used to finance the project are paid back from cash flow generated by the project. So for a community solar project, the subscription fees provide the cash flowing back in. I do want to mention that this presentation will not discuss funding opportunities or grants. There are other presentations during this conference, and there's so many resources online that can help you with that, but not my area. So again, there are a lot of project financing 101 resources that you can look at to learn about the basis of project finance. I have a lot of resources at the end of this presentation that can be helpful. So we aren't going to get into the very nitty-gritty of it, but I will say that community solar is financed like any other solar project. You can use cash, loans, grants, operating revenue, or incentives, and we'll talk about tax incentives later. What is important to note for community solar is that there are many off-takers, many people who are receiving electricity. This adds risk to a project because if an off-taker defaults on payments or drops out of the program, that's a revenue loss for the developer of the project. This additional risk may cause some potential investors less willing to get involved in the project. There are two ways you can manage this risk of having additional off-takers. You can use a subscriber management organization. They'll provide services including billing, customer service, payment processing, and subscriber replenishment. So a subscriber management organization can ensure that your community solar project is always fully subscribed. You can also manage the risk by having an anchor tenant. That's a subscriber who takes about 40% of the power produced. This could be a large store in the area, a medical building, a government office building, etc. Having that anchor tenant reduces the number of off-takers, reducing the amount of risk. In terms of the new Community Solar Act in New Mexico, it says that non-tribal projects cannot have a tenant take over 40% of a project's capacity. That doesn't apply to tribal projects. You could have an off-taker take 50, 60% of the project because of that little caveat for tribes. Now, talking about tribal roles in developing a community solar project, there are three main categories of roles. As you can see in this table, as you move down the table, there's more risk for the tribe, but there's also more potential reward. And I want to note that in the tribal example column I have on the very right, I'm not providing examples of tribal community solar projects. They're tribal solar projects in general. So first, the tribe can be the landowner and lease out property to a project, which is what the Navajo Nation has done, leasing land to a developer for the Cameron solar generation plant for 30 years. This brings in consistent and known income. However, you do give up some control. You don't have any control over the project itself. The tribe can be a debt or equity partner in a project. This is an opportunity to make some more money, but it requires ready capital, and it has some implications for tax credits, which we'll get into a little bit later. An example of this is that the Forest County Potawatomi in Wisconsin collaborated with Sunvest Solar Incorporated to install over 900 kilowatts of solar PV systems at 15 of their tribal facilities. A DOE grant supported half the project, and then the partnership with Sunvest allowed the tribe and Sunvest to offset the other half of the project with tax credits. And then finally, the tribe can be the project developer or owner. This is the riskiest and it is the most expensive. And also, depending on the business structure of the developer, you might not be able to take advantage of tax credits. The Southern Ute Tribe of Colorado, or in Colorado, received a $1.5 million grant from the DOE Tribal Energy Program, and then the tribe paid for the rest of a $3 million array. So the tribe had to raise over $1.5 million. That's a huge chunk of money. Really important to remember when we're talking about the role of the tribe in solar development is the impact of tribal sovereignty. Lenders may see functioning within tribal sovereignty and sovereign immunity as an additional risk. They may be less inclined to be involved in the project. You may have to sign some kind of limited waiver of sovereign immunity. I am not a lawyer. That is something you talk to a lawyer about, but it is something to keep in mind while you are pursuing solar. And now, we talked a couple seconds ago about how tribal business structures impact how a project goes. You'll all understand tribal business structures options a lot better than I do, so we aren't going to spend a ton of time on this. I have a lot of resources at the end, again, that will give more details on different business structure options. The goal of this information, this table here, is just to summarize the different types of business structures for you all with respect to how easy they are to establish, how the structure impacts taxation, and what they accomplish in terms of legal and financial protection for the tribe at large. It's important to remember that no matter the business structure you choose to pursue, the purpose of the structure is to protect the tribe and its finances. Now, it's also important to note that many of these structures allow you to avoid federal income taxes, which is awesome, but it means you can't take advantage of tax benefits that are available for renewable project development. And that's what we'll talk about next. But first, I know that we're a little bit late on time, but I wanted to open up for any questions on what we just talked about quickly, or we can move on. It's up to the host.
If there's any questions, I can bring the microphone to you. None? Thank you, Laura. You can carry on.
Okay, great. Before I move on, I just want to emphasize that what we're talking about and everything that I will talk about is about large scale projects. We're talking about borrowing and spending at a pretty large scale. I mean, you probably realized that when I said that there was a $3 million project. And then something that I get asked is, can a subscriber management organization be part of a tribal organization? Yes, a tribal organization could serve as this business. Now we're getting into the tax stuff, the fun stuff. So the Solar Tax Investment Credit, the ITC, is a tax credit that can be claimed on federal income taxes for a percentage of the cost of a solar system that is placed into service during the tax year. It can be applied to solar systems on residential and commercial properties. Again, we're talking about large scale commercial properties in this presentation. Currently, the business that installs, develops, and or finances a solar project can deduct 26% of the cost of installing a solar system from their tax liability. That's a dollar for dollar reduction in the income taxes that a company would otherwise pay the federal government. The ITC does have a scheduled step down. It decreases in percentage over the next couple of years. In 2023, you'll be able to deduct 22%. In 2024, commercial and utility scale projects will be able to deduct 10%. People who install residential systems won't be able to take advantage of the ITC after 2024. Tax credits and the step down may change with legislation being negotiated in Congress. keep an eye on it. I checked the news this morning. This is what the step down is as of today. The production tax credit is another tax credit, but we aren't going to talk about it in this presentation because solar projects can't use it. The Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System, or MACR, is a depreciation system that allows the capitalized cost of a solar system to be recovered over a specified period of time through annual reduction on taxes. Depreciation is the annual allowance for the wear and tear and deterioration of a property. Most tangible properties are depreciable, like community solar. MACRS is considered accelerated because instead of depreciating over the equipment's useful lifetime of 25, 30 years, the owner is allowed to claim large portions of the investment each year for the first 5 years. You can see in the table in my slide, that's from the IRS, some assets have different depreciation year recovery periods. Solar is 5 years, that's why that red box is there. You don't have to worry about the other ones. If you're taking advantage of the ITC, the depreciation rate is impacted. That exact rate really varies on what you're taking the ITC, the business's tax rate, et cetera. And then finally, bonus depreciation is something that currently is important to know about. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 increased bonus depreciation to 100% of assets acquired and placed in the service from September of 2017 to the 1st of 2023. So this allows you to write off like 2 times what you otherwise could write off in costs. The depreciation is subtracted from your income. It's another source of tax credit. Potentially, you could be writing off more than what the solar project is actually valued if you're taking advantage of the ITC and bonus depreciation. As I mentioned earlier, though, tribes and tribal corporations cannot monetize the ITC, the PTC, or MACRS because they're exempt from the federal income tax. Tribes may have formed a state chartered tribal organization. That was one of the options that was covered in a couple of slides ago. And that's a corporation wholly or partially owned by the tribe and organized under state law. So they're not tax exempt, so they could take advantage of tax benefits. However, these corporations might be pretty small and not be able to have enough tax credit, not have enough tax appetite to use the tax credits efficiently. Tax appetite is the combined value of tax deductions or credits, just tax benefits, when that combined value exceeds a project's internal ability to use them in the first 5 years of a project's life. That may be the case for a tribal entity. So I will be talking about next how you can use a tax equity investor who can take advantage of these tax benefits. Before I get into the different tax equity partnership options, if a tribe is partnering with a current existing developer, the developer may enter in one of these tax equity partnership arrangements. The developer will handle all of this. Most large-scale developers do use tax equity partnerships to capture the value of tax credits. But when I am talking about the tax equity partnership options, we are assuming that the developer itself is a tribal organization. So this would assume that the tribe/developer would have to know how to do these partnerships. A partnership flip is currently the most popular tax equity partnership arrangement. In a partnership flip, the developer and the tax credit investor form a partnership. A tax credit investor is an investor with a need for tax credits and depreciation. The terms tax credit investor and tax equity investor are used really interchangeably, so that's just something to keep in mind. The tax equity investor makes a cash investment in the partnership in exchange for equity interest and all of the profits, losses, and tax credits of the partnership initially. So as you can see in the slide, in this situation, the tax credit investor has invested like 99% of what the project is worth. The developer will also have some equity interest, not a whole lot. You can see in my slide, like 1%. Now this ownership arrangement is maintained until the tax credit investor achieves a negotiated return on investment or until a time period that's agreed upon in the contract. Most partnership flips happen at the certain return on investment. The date is really unusual. At this point, all the tax benefits are used up. At the flip, ownership interests automatically flip. That's why it's called a partnership flip. The developer now owns the majority of the project and they receive all of the profits and losses. The tax credit investor may still own a small percentage of the project. Usually the developer is given the option to purchase that last percentage at market value. A partnership flip offers some great advantages for tribes. The tax equity investor provides most of the capital up front, so the tribe doesn't have to have a large chunk of money ready, and it's an easier way for the tribe to own a project in the long run. However, there's limited payments to the tribe until later in the project because the tax credit investor initially is getting all of those profits and losses. It still does require some upfront capital contribution from the tribe, and the developer must consult the tax equity investor on major decisions. So you're giving up some control over the project. There would be a third party involved here. You can see the subscriber management organization. They don't play a role in the flip itself because they don't have any equity in the project. However, I am mentioning it as a reminder that using a subscriber management organization will reduce the risk in a community solar project, but it also can add costs that will affect the profits and losses of the system. Like I said earlier, a tribal organization could serve as a subscriber management organization. The role of a subscriber management organization could be part of the tribal entity that also serves as the developer. Again, does not play a role in the partnership flip, but it's important to remember because it affects your profits. In a sale-leaseback partnership, the developer, a tribe or tribal entity, again, sells the project immediately to a tax credit investor. The tax credit investor owns the project and therefore is eligible for the ITC and makers. The tax credit investor leases the project back to the developer. So the developer receives sale proceeds and cash from power purchases, but they do handle all the operations and maintenance and pay the lease to the tax credit investor. At the end of the agreed upon lease period, the developer typically has the right to repurchase the project at a fair market value. So for tribes, this can be really advantageous because the tax equity investor will provide 100% of the capital up front. The tribe will get a pretty big cash inflow at the very beginning by selling the project to the tax credit investor. And the tribe gets all of the cash flow from power purchases. However, it is costly for the tribes to acquire long-term ownership of the project. The tribe has to operate the project and generally bear all operating and maintenance costs. So if there's some huge storm that destroys a bunch of panels, that's on the tribe. And it does require a very large contribution from the tax credit investor. And that may limit who wants to be a tax credit investor in the situation. And then, like the last partnership system, the subscriber management organization does not have any equity in the project, but using them to manage subscribers for a community solar project will impact the total profit that the developer, the tribe, can make. This table is an overview of a partnership flip and a sale leaseback structure compared to the tribe developing and owning a project directly. Direct ownership requires the tribe to have a huge capital investment that may not be possible, but it offers a lot more power. This brings us back to the economic and energy sovereignty issue at the heart of many tribal energy decisions. There are so many aspects that you have to consider when planning large-scale solar projects. Sorry. Okay. Anyways, there are so many aspects that you have to consider when you're planning a large-scale solar project. These tax equity partnerships that we just covered gives the tribe more options when you're pursuing community solar, and you probably are all thinking pretty deeply about it now. So I am happy to answer questions. My slides have at the very end have key terms and lots of resources. And I think that they'll be passed along after the conference is over. So thank you very much for your time. Yeah, thanks so much.